If you want your life to improve this year, then you absolutely must end this relationship in 2025. Most people think that toxic relationships are with other people, but the truth is that the relationship you need to end in 2025 is the one you have with your own victim story. Your story is keeping you in a negative feedback loop, and until you break up with it once and for all, your struggles will continue to repeat themselves every year, like the movie Groundhog's Day.
Well, it's Groundhog Day.
So until you can break free from this cycle, nothing much really is going to change. You're going to get to the end of 2025 and post things online like good riddance 2025. What an awful year. 2026 is going to be my year, except it won't. It's going to be another year of the same patterns repeating themselves and the same issues coming up. Even if you get an all new setting and a whole new set of characters in your story, you're still going to be living the exact same plot line until you can finally break up with your victim story and end this relationship for good. Hi, friend, and welcome to another episode of From the Depths. My name is Steph, and I'm excited to get into this topic with you today. It's a big one, so let's dive right in. So, what is your victim story? Your victim story is any disempowering story that your mind tells you. It's like a backpack full of heavy weights that you've been collecting throughout your entire life and carrying around with you every single moment of your existence since then. It can be the thoughts that your mind brings up anytime you experience something that is perceived as negative, like if you get a flat tire on your way to work. And instead of calmly addressing the situation, your heart rate accelerates, your body jumps into fight or flight, and your mind starts to say things like, why does this always happen to me? Of course, this would happen at the worst time possible. Or why can't anything ever go my way? Alternatively, it can also be the story that we tell ourselves when things go well, such as receiving a raise or some really good news and immediately following that with thoughts like, well, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Or, well, it's not as much as so and so got for the same thing. Or even as subtle as, it's about time. All of these thoughts put you into a victim role rather than a state of empowerment. And where do these thoughts come from? They're like the branches and leaves of the tree from our main victim story, our core trauma or core wound, the story that we tell ourselves about our past that we use to rationalize why we aren't more successful, in better shape, healthier, wealthier, or any other state of being better than how we perceive ourselves to be in this moment. This might include thoughts as seemingly simple as I grew up with parents who always criticized me, to as complex as I was physically, sexually, or emotionally abused as a child or adult. Now, these thoughts put us in a disempowered state, and when we identify with them as a part of who we are, a part of our being, then we're keeping that backpack full of heavy weights on our shoulders. You might think that your victim story is actually helping you cope with challenges and navigate the murky waters of life, but it's actually the number one thing holding you back in every single aspect. It's putting a filter on the lens through which you perceive life, and it's weighing you down. So our victim story is what we often refer to as my truth. But what I'm about to say could quite possibly be your red pill, blue pill moment. First of all, your memory is unreliable. Have you ever heard of the unreliable narrator? The unreliable narrator is an untrustworthy storyteller. This is actually a literary technique that a lot of authors will use to kind of keep the audience guessing and keep them on their toes and unsure of what's true and what can be trusted. The unreliable narrator is either deliberately deceptive or it's just unintentionally misguided, but it's ultimately not credible as a source for storytelling. Now, our minds are, in fact, very unreliable narrators. Depending on our mood at the time, like hunger, tiredness, body temperature, we can perceive things very differently. For example, have you ever accidentally assigned ill intention to what someone said just because you were feeling tired or hangry and then later realized that it was just your own misinterpretation? Yeah, neither have I. There's actually a scientific study by Loftus and Palmer in 1974 where participants were shown short clips of car accidents. They were then asked questions about what they saw, and the key question varied between groups. One group was asked how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other, and the other group was asked how fast were the cars going when they hit each other. And they tested this with other words like collided, bumped, or contacted. A week later, from having witnessed the accident, participants were asked follow-up questions, including whether they saw broken glass in the accident. And there was no broken glass in the videos. But the group where they had used the word smashed actually reported higher speed estimates of the cars than those with the group hit or contacted. And when asked about broken glass, participants in the smashed group were significantly more likely to incorrectly recall seeing broken glass compared to the other groups. This study demonstrated the misinformation effect, or how subtle changes of wording a question can actually influence memory, and it will actually cause you to remember things differently based on the wording. So obviously this has pretty significant implications for legal matters. But if we think about this in terms of just our daily life and our daily experience, if something as simple as changing one little word can have such a significant impact on what we even remember. And when they're remembering the glass, they truly believe that that's what they saw. So their memory is their truth, according to, the way that we kind of use that phrase today, but it wasn't true at all. So imagine how differently we're all perceiving our worlds based on this filter that we've been programmed to experience life through. We all see the world through very different colored lenses. So we must begin to examine how these filters may be shaping our experiences and our perceptions. Now, this is not intended to gaslight anyone into not believing yourself or your experiences, especially when it comes to trauma and abuse. It's important for the psyche to not try to deny that these things happened or continue to subject ourselves to physically or emotionally harmful environments. That would be a very unloving behavior towards ourselves. So we're not here to dispute the contents of the backpack that you've been carrying, but rather to illustrate the importance of setting the backpack down and moving forward without it. So we need to keep in mind that we are always manifesting who we are, whether we're aware of it or not. We're always attracting things to ourselves based on what we're holding in our energetic field. And what we keep active in our consciousness draws more of that same activity into our experience. This is why we keep running into the same patterns over and over. Have you ever noticed how a friend of yours, or maybe yourself, keeps dating the same type of people? The new partner starts out seeming like this amazing person who you have this great connection with, but then as time goes on in the relationship, the same type of behavior patterns start to emerge. Or the same thing can happen with career paths. You get a new job, which seems amazing at first, but over time, the same kind of patterns emerge and you're dealing with the same type of workplace drama and issues that you had at your past position. And the common denominator in all of this is you. Why is this? It's because you're still dating your victim story. Another way to think of this is like a rock climber. Okay, I'm gonna use the whiteboard here. As a rock climber sets out to climb the mountain, they set up these little anchor points along the way. And climbing a mountain. Okay, they've got their little harness and they're attaching the rope as they go, so that if they fall, they're only gonna drop past this second point here. Now, as they keep climbing up the mountain and move on from these, unless they have gone through and removed these anchor points, somebody else can come along and attach their own rope to the same points and climb the mountain. Now, the same type of thing is going on with your energetic field. If you have an open anchor, say this anchor is seeking love outside of yourself. Or this anchor is seeking comfort by way of food or drugs and alcohol. Then until you remove these anchors, the next person can come along and attach to it, and you're still going to keep repeating the same cycle. So until we can totally remove these anchors and just get that out of there, we're going to keep having the same issues arise. So if you remember from one of my past videos, one of the brain's primary functions is to preserve energy. So your brain is always going to try to do the most efficient process possible to preserve energy, which helps you survive. There's actually a part of the brain called the reticular activating system, or RAS. The RAS is responsible for several things, but one of the things it does is it reinforces our beliefs. So it can actually reinforce beliefs and influence our behavior. For example, if you decide to buy a new car, your reticular activating system might start to notice that car more often in the external world. Part of the mechanism for this is that it also helps to direct our attention. So when we start to think about really anything, the reticular activating system will help direct our attention towards that And through that focus, it will start to draw those things towards us. Our minds will be more likely to actually notice that particular thing that we've been thinking about. So the more that we're focusing on any particular story or belief system, whether we're conscious of it or not, the more that our reticular activating system is going to pick up on those things and it's going to help reinforce those beliefs. So for instance, if you have a childhood trauma and because of it, you have this belief that you're not worthy of love, your mind is going to seek out that feeling of unworthiness, and it's going to, through the reticular activating system, is actually going to reinforce those beliefs, and it's going to keep that active in your field. So you're going to start to see more examples of you not being worthy of love. You're going to start to notice that, and then your mind's attention is going to go there. And as we've talked about before with the law of attraction, the law of attraction doesn't attract what you want and what your thinking brain says that it wants. It attracts what you really are on a deeper level. So these stories that we're telling ourselves, while they may be rather unconscious, we're not like intentionally telling ourselves that we're unworthy or, not worthy of love. We're not saying that to ourselves in a conscious way, but our subconscious is saying that, and it's drawing more of those experiences towards us. So if we can start to use our reticular activating system in our favor, we can actually train it to direct attention to specific things, like our goals and the type of people we want to have in our lives. But until we break up with this old story, we're going to continue to repeat these patterns and have the same type of things come up. So we have to uninstall these anchors. And how do we do that? We have to stop seeking that feeling from outside of ourselves, and we need to drop our victim story and remember who we truly are. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is that you are not just your physical body. A few episodes ago, I talked about the 3 states of being that we are in at all times, which can be likened to water. We are the physical body, which is like the ice, the solid matter. We are the liquid body, like our thoughts and beliefs and mental activity and emotions. And then we are like the gas state of water, of steam, through our spirit and our soul. So when we start to identify more with the body, we get more stuck in that victim story and feel that that's really who we are and it's part of us. But really, we are so much more than just this solid matter form. And side note, if you want to get really quantum physics about this, if we break matter down into its smallest components, there's actually just empty space. Physicists have reduced all the cells down to their atomic structure, and when you get to the nucleus of an atom, there's actually nothing there. Let that blow your mind for a moment. So our solid state is a bit of an illusion. It's like we're living in a simulation. So if we start to wrap our minds around this concept, then our victim story is just something that happened to us in the simulation. So imagine you're playing the game The Sims. I actually just downloaded this game over the weekend just to use it as an example. But imagine you're playing The Sims, this game where you're basically creating a whole human life and you're living the real life, but it's just in the game. So let's say you're playing the game and somebody else comes along and beats you up and steals all the stuff out of your house. Now, as the game character, that's very upsetting. It's a very upsetting thing to be beaten up and have all of your belongings stolen. But as the player of the game, nobody has actually beaten you up or robbed you. They literally can't. They can't come out of the game and punch you in the face. Now, if you're really zoomed into the game and identified as that character, then you'll likely feel really upset and you'll have a big emotional response. But you can just zoom out and remind yourself it's just a game and it's probably not worth losing sleep over. What happens in the game can't hurt you in real life, so a punch to the face in The Sims will never cause you to have a bruised jaw. And this is how it is with the game of life that we are in right now. If you start to see this life as a game, then anything that happens to you, anything that hurts you emotionally or physically, it can't impact who you really are, which is that infinite state of being. Something that happens to you in a level of the finite cannot impact who you are in the infinite. So when we talk about my truth and we're referring to our sad victim story, these things, we may have experienced them, yes, and they're things that we do need to process and work through. But if we can remove our identity with that as being who we are, then we can take that backpack off. We can set that down and walk away and no longer have to be attached to that as part of who we are. All right, now let's talk about getting out of the negative feedback loop. If you don't intentionally and consciously reprogram your own mind, someone else will continue to program it for you. So it's really essential that we get ourselves out of this negative feedback loop and start to reprogram our minds ourselves with what we want to have happen and how we want our lives to be. All right, so what is this negative feedback loop? The negative feedback loop happens when we introduce negative stimulus and then we have a negative reaction. So negative stimulus happens here, and then we react. Negative stimulus. And then we react negatively. Reaction. Then we react to our own reaction. So something bad happens. Let's just keep this simple and say you get in a car accident and your reaction is to get very upset, to, get very emotionally charged negative feelings, anger, frustration, resentment towards the other person that may have been responsible, resentment for, whatever consequence may have come about, like a ticket or something like that. So you react emotionally. And then we realize, oh, I should not have acted that way. Why did I get so upset? Why did I let that get to me? And then we react to our reaction by beating ourselves up. Why can't I be more positive? Why can't I get out of this loop? What is wrong with me? And then that draws to ourselves another negative stimulus. So this just keeps this loop going. It keeps this loop open and we just get stuck in it. So to break this cycle, we have to interrupt the pattern. Let's go with back to the fuchsia. So stimulus comes along, we get in a car accident. If we are able to intersect right here, then we can get ourselves out of the negative feedback loop entirely with a positive or neutral reaction. Neutral would be not allowing it to impact us negatively, not allowing that to get us charged emotionally. Or a positive reaction could be being grateful that nobody was hurt or injured and that it's something we can just easily get fixed and no big deal, move on with our lives. We'll forget about it in a year or two or less. So that would be breaking this cycle and this pattern at this point. Now, if we go ahead and do have our negative reaction, because we're just so habitually used to that, and sometimes, it can be tough to remember that in a situation where your fight or flight response is triggered really quickly. And it's just easy to go back into those normal patterns of behavior. So, okay, we have our reaction. But then what we can do is interrupt right here and decide, okay, I reacted. All right, I had to, I let myself process my feelings so that I'm not bypassing anything. But now I'm gonna stay positive or neutral about my reaction. So I'm not gonna beat myself up that I reacted that way. I'm just gonna give myself grace and allow that to have happened and move forward. So now we're breaking this pattern here. And we're less likely to have another negative stimulus as a result of this cycle. Now, this cycle is not just going to stop. This is like anytime something happens, this cycle is going to perpetuate until we break the reaction enough times that is our new pattern and our new habitual response. So basically what we need to do is completely erase all of this and make this our new cycle. So we have a stimulus. And now this could be positive or negative. The previous example could be positive or negative too, but I think it's just easier to illustrate when it's something negative happens. We'll talk down the road about how to respond when positive things happen and we have a negative reaction to them. Okay, so positive or negative stimulus. Our typical response would have been down here, reacting negatively. Beautiful handwriting. Now what we're going to do is react positive or neutral. And then we're going to react to our reaction, positive or neutral. This could be thinking about the progress we're making and, oh, look at that. I didn't react so negatively this time, or I kind of kept my cool this time. My mind didn't immediately take me back into, why does this always happen to me? This is the story of my life. These kinds of things always happen at the worst time. Instead, we say, thank goodness I'm safe. Thank goodness this wasn't worse. Just grateful that, I have a car to begin with. Things like that can really help us to get out of this pattern and into this higher up headspace. And then we can look at our reaction and be pleased with, the progress that we're making and just be in gratitude for that progress. There will be more stimuli. It's just the way the world works. This is part of the game that we're playing, is how we respond to the stimulus. This is everything that happens in our life. So if we can start to get into this loop of reacting more positively, or at least neutrally, like pausing before we react and choosing how we react, choosing how we want to let that make us feel, choosing the thoughts that we're going to have around that incident. And then we start to see ourselves more positively. Our reticular activating system is going to notice our reaction was much more positive, and it's going to reinforce that and help us in this process. So our brains are actually wired to help us and help make this process a little bit easier, but we have to take advantage of it and understand what's happening and have awareness. So the first step right here, before you can decide if you go up or down, this awareness has to happen. So awareness of our choice. We need to be aware that we have a choice of how we want to respond. So if we can stay aware, make an improved choice, respond to our improved choice, and have this pattern start to get reinforced, we're going to start to draw fewer really negative experiences to us. But also, even if things do happen that are challenging, we're going to respond to them differently. So we're going to start to just feel better. And I think that's pretty great too. I think that's a pretty great reward in and of itself. So just feel better and not be reacting negatively so much. But again, this takes time because our initial response is the one that we have deeply programmed into us, and that is the way that we just normally react to things. So if you're somebody who tends to get really overwhelmed easily, or go to anger quickly, or even suppress emotions, this is going to be a habitual response that's going to continue to happen until we start to become aware that we have this choice and we can choose a different reaction and then a different reaction to our reaction. So whether we interrupt here or whether we pattern interrupt right here. Again, we could react negatively here and say, why am I not farther along? Blah, blah, blah. I only mildly was neutral on this, or, whatever it might be. Our brains can tell us all kinds of things. But if we, again, can pattern interrupt, even if it's up here, then we're going to start to shift the way that this cycle is happening in our lives. So part of this entails radical acceptance of what is. So radical acceptance of this stimulus, whether it's positive, neutral, or negative. If we just allow it to be, that will give us better awareness, less of a reaction, and an easier time just coping with this cycle. Allowing things to come up in our lives and knowing that there's sort of an echo from the past. Now, let's get into what that means. So what you're experiencing with your five senses, your reality, is actually an echo of past vibration. Going back to the video game and the different states of form that we're in, solid form or the finite takes time to catch up to the no form or the infinite. So we're always manifesting from whatever we're holding within our energy field. That includes all three states of our being. According to quantum physics, everything is in a constant state of probability. You can look into the double slit experiment for this. Until we observe something, it's in a state of probability and it's in a wave form. So it's in kind of that liquid form where it hasn't fully taken solid form yet and come into this physical plane. But everything that's happening in your experience right now as a manifestation of your past energy field. So you can really think of what's happening in your current experience as an echo of the past. It would be kind of chaotic if everything that we thought or felt just manifested instantly. Although the more you practice this type of stuff, the quicker these things will start to come into your reality. But everything is an echo of the past. So anything that exists in form started out as a thought. Nothing ever started out as its solid form, isn't in a solid state. So everything starts through thought. Let's go ahead and erase all of this. Love you so, matcha. Okay, so according to quantum physics, there is an energy field, and everything exists on this energy field in a state of probability. Now, our thoughts and emotions can actually impact this energy field and cause these ripples, which then translate into, when strong enough, translate into the world of solid form. But this happens first, and it takes some time you have to constantly be thinking about it or have enough of an emotional charge that it pops up, and then form will follow. But the form is always on a delay. So what we're seeing in our 3D reality is a delay of the past are past thoughts and emotions that have impacted the field. So for this to manifest now, this thought had to have happened, 2 months ago or so, let's say. Now, the time will vary based on how significant of an impact it's having on these different levels of reality, these different planes of existence. So the finite takes time to catch up to the infinite. So when it comes to your victim story, this stuff that happened in the past, it may have occurred in your experience. However, you do not have to remain attached to it. Detaching is not moving into a state of denial or suppression, but it's rather a radical acceptance of what is and the cessation of the need for anything to have happened differently than it did. So we've got to set this backpack down. We're carrying around this backpack with all these heavy weights and this story that we've so identified with up until now, when you're going to start choosing a different story and choosing a different pathway. When you let that bag go, it's going to feel so free, but you're not quite off the hook yet. Okay, so that episode ended up being a little bit too long to put all in one, so I'm actually going to be splitting this up into a two-parter. So stay tuned next week when I publish the second half of this video and continue to learn how you can make 2025 your best year yet and actually do it this time. Also, if you're wondering why my lighting changed so drastically, I actually moved my setup into a room that gets really good natural light and thought I would try this out. So if you want to, let me know what you think. Do you prefer the other lighting or do you prefer this one? Sometimes I can't record in this room, so I set up the other one so that I could always record in there, but it's kind of nice to have a little bit of a brighter, more natural light setup just to change it up a little bit. So be sure to subscribe and hit the little bell icon, which will notify you when the next episode drops. I can't wait to talk to you again soon, and in the meantime, keep rising.